Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it might be, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Welcome to the After Hours show. My name is Joe Umami. I'll be cooking for you this evening, and I'm joined by Ann Lee, a retired college professor and community member at the Daily Coast. She's a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and is a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Evening, Ann.
Hey Joe, how's it going?
Not bad, not bad. I thought
Looks
I'd make them.
nice.
I thought I'm still coming from sunny southern Turkey, Turkey. Sorry, still getting used to that change. I thought I'd make a mess. I thought I'd make a mess tonight. A couple of mezes. Sorry.
Looks good. Aubergine.
Yeah, so I'll be making two different dishes here. I was at the market the other day and they had parsley root.
Nice.
So I'll be making mashed parsley root potato salad. We'll be chopping up some of the stems
Nice.
and we'll mash the root parts. Um, Mash that with some garlic. I've got some, let's see, apple cider vinegar. And over there on the right are nigella seeds or onion seeds. Put some of those in there, some scallion maybe. And we'll chop up a little bit of the stems so we get some crunchy factor in there. Maybe I'll throw in a little pickle. And then the other dish, since I've got access to this gas stove, I think I'll char the eggplant and pepper and tomato and not completely, just to get a little bit of the char flavor, and then I'll roast it in a saute pan or something so that it gets mushy and cooked. And then I'll chop that up, mix that with some. Oh, let's see. I've got some pomegranate syrup from a farmer, and olive oil, and maybe some garlic.
Yum.
Yeah, two semi-traditional mess here in Turkey.
I'm hungry again. Damn it.
It's been I assume it's been a uneventful week over there on the other.
The fall weather, it's getting cold. And yeah, it's a crazy crap, Trump is just screwing with with everybody, actually. He's showing it's a dominance exercise, essentially. He's messing with the senators, messing with Congress.
Is he intimidating them to go full MAGA or what?
Yeah. Well, and some of it is just simply screwing with them. I mean, the idea of Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General is, it's sort of a joke. On the one hand, Gaetz himself pronounced it a joke, but several years ago, that is, and but yet he's doing it. I mean, and it's just it's transactional. You know, Gates is being put up for it only simply because the ethics today was supposed to be the day that they were going to release an ethics committee report about him and underage girls at wild sex parties and with drugs and crap like that. So, fortunately, the report has already been written, and there's just a lot of talk about leaking the darn thing. So,
is there something unseemly about that?
I think it's just the usual of what goes on in Washington, and it just never gets talked about. We recall with Madison Cawthorn, who is no longer in the House, how he got invited to wild parties. Even the disgraced George Santos referred to some of those things. So both hetero and gay, straight and gay parties of one sort or another, other kinds of things.
Positively Roman.
Sorry?
Sounds positively Roman.
Very Roman. It's very Roman. The whole notion of a kind of Roman governance is sort of there. And so the senators are being put up against the wall, essentially, by Trump. He's just challenging them to be loyal or not loyal to him. The odds are that a finagling will occur. There'll be a recess appointment. Probably that's the most optimistic one can expect out of this. And that Gates is not going to withdraw from this unless something else comes up or they're going to offer him something else. That he has a lot of options on that sense. Gates really doesn't care. There's been floated things that Gates will go back to Florida and try and run for governor. So that may happen. I don't know if DeSantis is term limited or whatever, but that will be all more interesting for 2026, assuming that they don't get Gates into jail, which is really where he belongs. But that's another story. Joe is proceeding right along. I'm going to try a new feature this week. Well, we'll see how new and good it is. I'm going to try and introduce this idea of the week in review, week spelled W-E-A-K, and because namely our news tends to be on that side, on the weak side. That's a big root. That's a big darn root. You say that's a parsley root?
I believe it's parsley root. It could be celery root.
Oh, okay.
My Turkish is terrible, so I haven't learned all of the words yet in the market.
That Turkish cuisine.
It's smelling more like parsley root to me.
Okie dokie. I only say that because the thing I'm putting out in Daily Coast tonight is on potato fibers, making potato clothing. And I think that's a huge thing for the future, is reuse of waste product. I mean, normally they would go into other kind of landfill, feed, other things. But there's, I think, an entire market segment that has not been fully plumbed. You could have pineapple clothing, for example, coming from the fibers of pineapples. And potatoes would save, this is just not hippie stuff. It saves, what, 92% water. I mean, all of this water resources would be saved, if nothing else. That's a potato, right? No, that's not a potato.
That's a potato.
Oh, all right. But you can see all that plus the roots. The roots are the big deal. The roots are toxic, you see, for potatoes, for example. And, that it's not good for much, but as a waste product, you can refine them into stuff like fibers and then yarn and then clothing. So an amusing design problem, one that I think is actually quite ecological. an ecological step that has not yet been taken by, for example, Project Runway with all of its liberalism, which I do watch. And I just think that they've discussed ecologically friendly clothing. And I think they've only approached it from a very simple-minded sort of point of view, and they need to rethink that. And I would hope that they would do that in subsequent iterations. That's just me, and other things that I'm lobbying for that are food related. Let me talk about the week in review, and it was a weak week. RFK Jr. has been nominated for or chosen or whatever, for Secretary of Health and Human Services. And without going through a long thing about, at one moment, he was actually a good environmental lawyer, in terms of trying to save the Hudson River and a variety of other things relative to, nuclear power. But they just went off the rails, and we could associate it with drug addiction and a variety of other things. But now he's being placed in a position where he's in charge of a whole bunch of major health things, but we can see why he did it. And I was talking about that just a moment ago with Trump attempting to exercise dominance, but also Trump is protecting himself because he made such a mess of COVID. And Trump, of course, never admits that he made a mistake, but we all recall his little trying to pimp ivermectin and anal lights and other sorts of drinking bleach and that sort of stuff. And the fact is, he was a real clown trying to dominate press conferences, etc. And he did a crappy job of it. And, I'm sure he just blames his minions and Fauci and a bunch of other folks who were, trying to keep the guardrails in place. But, this time around could get really crazy. But we don't have another pandemic yet. And so essentially Trump is covering his bases by using a human shield like RFK Jr. So that's kind of what's going on. He did draw a little bit of votes in certain places. The whole business of co-opting RFK Jr. in the electoral campaign was to essentially draw votes away from the Democrats, which may or may not have happened. And I think that still needs to be looked at. There is continuing commentary on that. AOC just made a comment on it today about, who betrayed the the Democrats. I mean, the fact of the matter is there was a lower turnout on Toto, and more of that lowered turnout went to the Republicans in the swing states. And my question, as I raised last week, that the Democratic Party needs to answer for is, how do they lose all of the swing states? It means that whatever strategy they had in mind sucked. And, hence we have 4 more years of really terrible things, or at least a gridlocked situation that may happen in the midterms, assuming we can even have midterm elections. That's, if you're really being a pessimist about these matters.
I was going to say 4 years only. Are you being a little optimistic there?
Yeah, I'm probably being too optimistic in that sense. But the fact is, lawfare is going to be the name of the game. People are going to be suing all over the place. It's not the Republicans only who can delay things. And I think a lot of things can get tied up. Needless to say, the ACLU et al. Are going to be probably getting a little bit more money this time around, just simply because people's rights need to be protected, and they're going to be trashed. Some people at the very basis of our society are going to think that they have the right to insult other people because they think the power of the state's behind them. And no, I don't think so. Scorch them eggplants, aubergine. That is a big one.
Oh, it's kind of medium. It's not too big.
Oh, yeah, I suppose we'll see. This is an interesting day for all kinds of reasons. Needless to say, with Trump in power, there have been a variety of discussions now, the reemergence of a ceasefire in Ukraine, but it's not going to happen. There's just too much stuff going on to have one, and I think it's going to require a lot more bloodshed, unfortunately. The goal for the Russians, it's been said, and this is more, sort of disinformation perhaps, it's that the Russians want to seize back Kursk Oblast, that is to take back Russian territory by the time Trump is inaugurated. So you can see how people have been thinking about their scheduling. They're doing a crappy job of it, but they're willing to throw Chinese troops, North Korean troops, a bunch of other things. I think they finally got up to the 10,000 troop mark, although I think only actually about 3,000 troops are sort of being thrown at Ukrainians. Ukraine is still doing a decent job. But of course, the side issue, of course, is blaming Biden for not letting loose the limitations on long-range missiles or intermediate missiles that have been transferred to the Ukrainians. The Europeans are stepping up, not so much from there is a sort of money thing that's going on that may or may not occur, depending on politics. There's still about $300 billion that has been seized by a variety of countries, including the U.S., that can be used for Ukrainian armament. And so, the Russians aren't going to take over anytime soon. And their demand, of course, is that the lines are frozen. And so they wind up with about 20% of Ukraine with some kind of demilitarized zone, noting, of course, that a demilitarized zone between the two countries would be about 800 miles long or something, and really complicated. If it were patrol, and who's going to patrol it? Are European troops going to patrol it, or whatever? Is the UN going to be involved? I think it should be, actually. That's just me. And of course, it has to be fairly wide because the distance on both sides of the line are easy to breach. Koreans have sent purportedly another set of long-range artillery, 170 millimeter type weapons. They have a lot extra ones. Remember, they have 10,000 artillery pieces pointed at Seoul, the capital of South Korea. So I think they can spare a few. So that's sort of happening. Trump is going to appoint probably a quote unquote special envoy to negotiate peace. And I think that he'll try and screw with people by making ridiculous choices. Probably Rick Grinnell, Paul Manafort, maybe trying to rehabilitate Rudy Giuliani, for example. All of those folks have been engaged in Ukrainian hijinks. And so I can just see that special envoy being created with just clueless stupidity going on. So that could happen. And recall, of course, that you had clowns like Rick Perry, et cetera, in the prior version of this kind of activity where, Trump tried to intimidate Zelensky to get dirt on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden many, many years ago. So needless to say, clown car activity will likely occur. And the background against which this is occurring is, of course, the constant moving of Russian oil. So we got that. We got Saudis. We got Elon Musk intervening on all kinds of. Elon Musk just had a meeting with the UN ambassador from Iran, and so he's sticking his thumb where, whatever, monkey business is occurring. This is the kind of monkey business that, those of you who voted for that idiot have. The Elon Musk co-presidency continues, even though it is fraught with difficulty, and it's supposed to be just advisory. Just like I assume Cardinal Richelieu was just an advisor, whatever. Anyway,
I completely forgot about Rick Perry. What is Rick up to?
that clown. Well, that clown was making money on oil stuff during the prior, because he was the energy secretary. Remember, he was the energy secretary, but he didn't realize that nuclear weapons also were part of his portfolio. Such a stupid man. Anyway, Rick Perry is probably floating around somewhere, and they'll put him on some sort of thing. He's probably
just a solid note. I've got vinegar here. Could be lemon juice. I grated the garlic into it, so the acid will counteract the acidity, or the alkalinity will counteract the acidity of the garlic, taking away the sharpness.
cool.
It's not so garlic.
That's a nice cutting board.
Oh, it looks pretty. Not a glued pieces. I think it might be bamboo, maybe.
Oh. There other craziness has occurred. Trump is proposing, and they haven't said who's going to be on this so-called warrior board, another advisory committee composed of, I suppose, ex-military. This is a way that Mike Flynn can reinsert himself into the process. I mean, there are plenty of more right-wing military, some of whom got fired, have been fired, some of whom sit in the interstices. There are several people who have been fired by numerous presidents who could be part of this board. Anyway, there are people, they have more conservative points of view, and they're going to eliminate wokeness in the military. In other words, it's a means by which they can rationalize firing 3- and 4-star generals. I don't know how many of them there are. There aren't that many of them, actually, in the big picture. But there are ones that have a quote unquote more liberal bent. That is, they believe that diversity is important as in terms of strength for the military. And so a white male military is what they sort of want. Well, it's kind of different with the demographic limitations, and especially since you're going to want people, troops of color, to essentially be your cannon fodder. So there's diversity, and then there's diversity. So whatever. But that will be noise that probably occurs for the next 4 years. The whole point, of course, is to constrain the military. That is sort of liberal military, and the liberal military aren't that liberal, if you've ever met any liberal military. I mean, the job one is lethality. So, whatever. So the point is that essentially,
Forget that when they're glorifying the military and veterans previous work.
yeah, exactly. Essentially, what Trump is trying to do is weaken the military so that if they have to run a military coup the next time around, which they were hinting at this at January 6th, that at least this time it'll succeed. Now, you don't need the entire military. All you need is a couple of military districts, a couple of divisions, and you seize all the right shit. And you can take over the government. That's just not something that happens in the United States, even though we have lots of movies threatening this. Whatever. Anyway, ooh, nice.
This is part of our roasted salad, so I'm just throwing it in the pan to cook everything a little bit more through.
Nice, probably nice smells, yeah.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
That's a nice knife too. That's a serious knife. Anyway, the Russians are trying to dictate the terms of any potential future peace negotiations now that Trump has won. There's discussions that the Democratic National Committee, Jamie Harrison, who's head of it, is going to quit. Needless to say, should quit. It's largely symbolic, but if you lose the election, usually you get fired. David Axelrod is putting up Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff for Barack Obama, who's actually a sort of okay, but really a centrist and problematic because he likes taking money from Elon Musk too. They've been David Axelrod, who's a friend of his from Chicago. Rahm Emanuel was the former mayor of Chicago. Is sort of trial ballooning whether Rahm Emanuel can come back to the administration. They've tried to put him back in other situations. He was the candidate for Secretary of Transportation before they put Pete Buttigieg in. So, you know, you can see the kind of retreading of the Democratic Party. I put up a little piece that I hadn't realized they do make actual digital traps for as anti-rape or chastity tools. I know that shifts one's awareness, but they make an insert that you insert, you know, like a tampon, but it has little prongs in it that in nature, I think this actually happens, that some animals have, you know, a defensive devices, dentata, as it were, to stop rape.
Opposite of the barbed penis.
Yes, exactly. Without talking at great length about ecology, but I think it does exist in nature. But anyway, somebody had developed one. A guy from where the hell was he? He's from some I can't remember what country. It was just interesting that he created this thing. It's a, you know, it's plastic. It you know, if something goes in, then it has when pulling out, it will leave these plastic barbs in that can only be removed by surgery. So, needless to say, it has there are consequences. So, and unfortunately, this has not been widely manufactured, or I think they prototyped it, and it just is not real. But I assert to you that I am sure there's a subpopulation that would support these things, and people of all genders might be amused by that particular thing. I wrote some things this week about our friend Cantaloupe Caligula. That is Trump. He's essentially, you know, people just need to relax. He's doing the same thing he was doing before. You can actually predict all of this stuff. People have predicted all of this stuff. The Matt Gaetz thing was a little bit out there, but you know, and it's a little bit improvisational. But I think you could see all of the other things. Obviously, the RFK Jr. thing has been telegraphed for months. So essentially, you know, they're not very bright, but they are consistent. So that's happening. I referred to Caligula because the myth is it's a mythical story. It's a legend. Even though he really loved his horse, he did have there is some suggestion, but you know, this is the problem with historians. Was it Suetonius or Tacitus? Somebody suggested that Caligula was so nuts that he elevated his horse to a position as a consul or you know, a senator essentially. So and then I made some joke about Catherine the Great, etc. But needless to say, Caligula, Cantaloupe Caligula is happening. In that case, the elevation of Pete Hegseth to the Secretary of Defense, which is highly problematic. He's put in people who Trump has put in, has suggested people that they still need to be approved by the Senate, but this is that domination, you know, submission test to see whether they're really going to put in people who aren't really very well qualified, so that Hedgepeth, whatever, is a National Guard captain. He has no experience in, for example, industry or procurement, which is really the big deal for secretaries of defense. It's not so much about war policy as it is logistics in the large sense. Now, of course, you know, the thing about Trump is he's all about being a symbol or figureheads. And so he's going to put more figureheads who will kowtow to his little his whims. And of course, as has been pointed out during the campaign, he's not all there, folks. So his decisions are made because the guy has telegenic features, and of course, so he sort of looks like he should be Secretary of Defense. But the reality is he's an incredible Islamophobe, has supported war criminals. He was the guy who lobbied Trump for pardoning these guys who had been thrown out of the SEALs, et cetera, for war crimes. What is just normal war crimes, the same war crimes that we've seen in Ukraine. Same stuff, somebody's totally neutralized and it's just sort of laying there, and you suddenly decide, well, I'm just going to kill this guy in front of a bunch of witnesses. So that's sort of getting those people off the hook and reinstating them into the military is kind of what his little gig was before he was the weekend host on Fox and Friends, which is kind of the the feeder for these sort of stuff. But anyway, so just like Caligula, you sort of figure out, well, did the emperor really appoint the stallion to his consul? Anyway, the Ukrainians are nonetheless, unhappy with the shift to Trump, but they were trying to prepare for it. The Europeans cranked up their own engagement. It's fairly clear that many countries, particularly the ones in the Baltic states, are very concerned about this because they're worried that Putin is just going to run in there and do exactly what NATO was created to do. That is to protect things like the Baltic states, among others. And then, of course, you have contradictory elements in Hungary and a variety of other places. All that's happening. A couple of weeks ago, they changed governments in Romania, and fortunately, the good guys managed to survive, although there was a Russian-supported thing going on there. You got a lot of that. There was some mainstream media intervention in this sort of leadership process. Some guy named Mango was up for Health and Human Service Secretary, but Trump would never nominate a fruit for such a position, and especially some guy named Pete Mango. At that same moment, Ben Carson polled as the leading candidate, which I think is a feint. Trump owes some portion of the victory to RFK Jr. Trump likes showing his quote unquote loyalty until he doesn't. Pete Hegseth, Trump's Secretary of Defense. Similarly, Tulsi Gabbard, formerly a Democrat, but also sort of a tool of, her military position was in psychological operations, so she's very familiar with, psyops stuff, but not for running a huge department like that oversees all of the other intelligence operations, the Director of National Intelligence. She is now a lieutenant colonel in the reserves, but rank is not all that it's cracked up to be, considering that she's going to be, when you look at Trump's former DNI, that was Dan Coates, that think you could actually put her there. Not that I'm in favor of that, but the fact is, he's just testing everyone's limits, and he wants people to be afraid. I think normally you would say, yes, I'm afraid of incompetent people being placed at the head of huge organizations. I think that there's sufficient safeguards in that particular case in terms of people doing really stupid things. But Trump likes screwing with that because he's just that kind of guy. And as he gets more as his cognitive abilities diminish, we're going to see crazy stuff happen.
Well, let me interrupt here for a
Also,
moment.
there's
Show you how juicy eggplant is.
Nice.
So that was partially roasted on open flame and then finished in covered dry skillet. So we got a bit of the roasted flavor, and then the rest of the cooking was just to steam the inside. So nice and juicy stuff. Now we just
Yum.
scrape out the guts, chop everything up.
Ah, nice. I have to try some of this stuff, doing some of this stuff myself. Just makes me too hungry. In other news, the stocks in the stock market, private prison stocks, not the kind that you see in the town square where you put the miscreants in, but as in
That's Rotten
stocks.
Tomatoes.
There we go. There's been a rise in their value. Jared Kushner is highly invested in private prisons, among other folks who hold fairly large portfolios in private prisons, which had a diminishment, of course, after the attempts to separate families at the border. And we can see that that's all going to reverse itself in the coming year or two, because Tom Holman, the former head of ICE, is going to be the new so-called border czar, which, of course, he doesn't have to appear before Congress. Needless to say, some kind of authoritarianism is at work. And so all that's happening. Last week, a Spirit Airlines plane took on fire. That is, some people's fired. It appears as if there were machine gun rounds fired at a Spirit commercial jet that was trying to land it at Port-au-Prince Airport in Haiti. And yes, they went all the way through this fuselage. And fortunately, since they were coming from a downward angle or upward angle, went up through the the luggage compartments. Right, you could see the bullets went all the way through the the line of bullets coming through the airplane. I mean, if you were standing up, you would probably get hit. Needless to say, that has happened. It's not the first time, in fact, that it's happened. And so, what happens? They declare an emergency. They flew to Dominican Republic to land, and there's been a suspension until they can figure out how to get, there are Kenyan peacekeeping troops in Haiti right now. There are 400 of them. I don't know if they're doing their job or not, but it's certainly clear that somebody's managed to squeeze off a few rounds at the airport. So that's the thing. Kristi Noem, the dog killer, is the new head of Homeland Security. You just can't make this stuff up. So that's happening. I mentioned last week that a 52-ton asteroid is going to pass the Earth at the minimum distance of 5,432 kilometers on the 17th of December. Now, it's not going to hit, right? And it's certainly not going to hit Trump, which would be sort of interesting if it did. But it's not. I mean, that's the minimum it'll pass coming at Earth. And since it's in an orbit, right, it's got more 6 or 10 more shots at this, but this is the most the closest that something is going to come, and it's about 52 tons of rock.
Not to be confused with Apophis.
Oh no!
We've got time.
Yeah, we still have time. In fact, I think we have till 2068 or something. At least that's the current. If you look at NASA's stuff, they, I mean, it could be revised, and of course, the big one big landing that was supposed to come in 2031 has been revised. So, whatever, stuff can change. Nature can be at work. The Russians damaged the Karakov reservoir dam in Donetsk, flooded, I don't know, a bunch of things, but it's not as major as the one that they hit in Zaporizhia last year. So not quite as bad, but they did hit another, they're hitting infrastructure. So that's a kind of problem. Um, that's going to be, and then and then stupid stuff is happening, right? Kristen Welker on Meet the Press last week or on Sunday referred to the GOP as being more diverse. I just like, I'm going, no, just the fact that you could get Latinos to vote for you does not mean that it's diverse. It's not signifying that the GOP is diverse. Yeah, that argument is much more problematic. And as I mentioned at the top, AOC referring to, what the hell happened on election day is still, it's a work in progress. You got to figure out lower turnout. Reactionaries, don't want a person of color in power, particularly one who happens to be a woman. So it's just like all of those things are, it's not a perfect storm, but a perfect earthquake of some kind. And so all of that's working at the same time. It's very sad that that this is the second time women have not been able to crash the ceiling. And of course, you could say that it's because the opponent was a better product, whatever that might mean. And all of the counterfactuals, like, well, they should have started earlier, Biden should have done this or that. You can indulge that all you like. It's just the fact and reality is that things are kind of screwed right now. In other week in review, Ukrainians are still hitting stuff really far into Russia with fairly slow-moving drones. They're not using very heavy-duty missiles, although they sent a bunch at Moscow this past week just to remind them that there's a lot of things to worry about. But the question you want to raise just at this moment in time is, were reactionaries voting? Was the defeat the result of just simply people defecting? That is, screw this. I don't like both candidates. I'm just not going to vote. Now, you want to ask those kind of things, and as I said, the central question, at least for me, is to ask the Democratic Party, how did you manage to lose every swing state? Did you treat them all the same? I can't believe that they did. I mean, I assume that there were other tactical options. So whatever. Let's see. October featured 2,000 unmanned aerial vehicles were launched against Ukraine by the Russians in October. That how you can work out the math for that, but they're sending a lot of stuff per day, and that is sort of happening. That's a nice mash, Joe.
Very tasty. Nice combination with parsley root and potato instead of just potato.
What a good combination. Yum, yum, yum. Me, I just throw a couple potatoes into the microwave, but I am I am going to eat them, not turn them into clothing. Well, we're getting towards that time, and yet we haven't organized our little scheduling kind of bit, and I wish we could do that. I hope someone will come forward and just sort of either do it as a recording or come participate with us here. This is not like I want to do this every week, I'm doing it because we're here, and we need to do this stuff. So, what are you slicing there, Joe?
I got a traditional, I've forgotten the name of the bread, but it's sort of like a pita without.
Looks like it has eggs in it or something, right? Or yes or no?
No, this is semolina.
Oh, okay.
Like a little toast.
Yum. we're getting at that time in terms of talking about our schedule. I would note, and there was some success in beginning this entire new series of we're watching Star Trek on the weekends, and we're now into the second series, that is the Next Generation. And we Prof. John showed Farpoint, the part 1 and part 2 on Sunday, and I think it was beginning rather well, and I'm looking forward to our looking at least some of the best of the Next Generation stuff. Tonight will feature, of course, the excuse me. Are we doing it tonight? I hope so.
Well,
Twilight
directly
Zone?
after the after hour show, we've got my new segment,
Oh,
frozen
okay.
another frozen moment in antiquity,
Ah,
where
okay.
I'm showing and discussing some of the sculptural works of art that we saw at the Antalya Archaeological Museum.
Yeah, it's quite a museum. It's got some really neat stuff. Neat stuff. So I'm guessing that we're not having Twilight Zone tonight, right?
Twilight Zone is on. John
Oh, no,
looks
no,
like
no, no.
Oh,
Twilight Zone is at its regularly scheduled time at 8:30.
oh, okie dokie. All right. John, you want to tell us what's coming up?
Sure. Tonight's episode, I think, will make for interesting discussion. It is called I Am the Night, Color Me Black.
Ooh.
And it features quite a large cast of very good actors. Michael Constantine, Paul Fix, George Lindsay, Ivan Dixon. Yeah, I think people will have a reaction. Let me say that.
This is all good. Yes,
Wow.
so 8:30,
Yeah.
bottom of the next hour, and excitement there. You'll have slides, won't you?
Oh, plenty.
Speaking of which, I'm not sure what's after Twilight Zone. Do you have an idea about that?
The Penguin. We continue March
Penguin.
long.
That's right. It's Penguin Night. It's Penguin Night. Let me also say, Bruce just mentioned that we haven't been talking about the 4B movement. That is in the spirit of, I guess, Lysistrata or whatever, that refusal to participate or to capitulate to men. And there's been some discussion at the national level of trying to organize women to have a unified resistance. And I think if there is a repeat of the Women's March, because I think that probably there's going to be a bigger need now than ever for a Women's March. We'll see how that happens. It replicates what has happened in some other cultures, that there is an attempt to resist, at least at the organizing women, to do that. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. Susanna reminds us that on the theater on Saturday night at 6:30 is a classic 1947 film noir, Nightmare Alley. Yes, it is a classic. Begins at 7:00. So 7:00 Eastern time. So I hope that people will do that. Weekly Marks is on 2 days this week, only because I'm trying to have 3 p.m. be the time, and however it operates. At some moment, I can't do this 7 days a a week, but we're going to do weekly marks at 3 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays, just to force me to do my reading. Sharon mentions that the 4B, B as in boy, movement will really take over in this country. Sharon suggests that we show women the Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is the kind of the poster boy for right-wing craziness in terms of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, sexism, and Trump likes him, invited him for dinner, came along with Kanye or whatever. So that the mansplaining movement it's very powerful, and I think that with all due respect, and there's probably going to be discussion about it, there'll probably be another women's march. Probably not in the winter, I think, as we last recall it, but probably something more towards the middle of the year after we get a sense of all the awfulness that's going to happen. You know, the many J6 people are going to be freed from prison. Not all of them, I would guess. I mean, some of them probably not. But we'll see. I mean, there are a couple who have very serious prison sentences, and so they may not get out of there until the end of the Trump administration, assuming there is an end of it. But there are a lot of other folks who probably will get released. And they will, of course, be the nucleus for another set of stupid things that could happen, and that probably were going to happen if Kamala had won. So that's my little thing there.
A little positive action of the was it House bill
I'm
to
sorry?
defund the House bill to defund nonprofits.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, there's all kinds of craziness being suggested, that is to defund nonprofits, which won't go through because simply there are a lot of nonprofits that, I mean, it's going to be selective and it's going to be problematic. And I think there's going to be a riot of one kind or another from a lot of different ideological positions. So it's going to be lawfare.
It was basically to tar nonprofits as supporting terrorist organizations. So
Only left-wing terrorist organizations as opposed to the right-wing ones.
Oh, I'm all finished here. We're all served up.
Beautiful.
Made a total mess. 2 meze. I've got potato celery root salad with nigella seed or onion seed. And then I chopped up some of the stem, the leaves. And I put a little pickle in there and garlic and apple cider vinegar. And then we've got the roasted eggplant, roasted pepper, roasted tomato, blended with olive oil and pomegranate syrup. With this lovely fresh pomegranate syrup from the farm.
Yum.
Just toasted up some bread. Very nice. Very vegetarian. Totally simple. Straightforward.
I'm hungry. Looking forward to those images, Joe, from Turkey. Let me remind folks that the watch along is at 10:30 tonight with the Penguin. The Penguin, Hench 21 is going to give us that. Open dialogue at 10-ish. 8:30, guided tour of the Twilight Zone with Prof. John. I Am the Night, Color Me Black at 8:30. That will be fun. I mean, for me, I haven't seen very much of Twilight Zone when it came out or even in reruns, etc. So this is, for me, it's always been interesting to watch it. It gives one a whole different sense of the 1960s, 70s, etc.
Well, I did want to react to something you said earlier, Anne, Professor Anne. I believe you described Rahm Emanuel as quote unquote okay.
Well, I mean, Rahm Emanuel is DNC chair is probably, okay, because it's just largely symbolic. And he can't do a worse job than Tom Perez or any of those other. I mean, I'm sure he takes care of his computer better than Leon Panetta or what's his name, the guy who gave up all the emails, Hillary's emails, not Tony. Damn it. Well, see, I don't care that much about the hierarchy of the
That was Podesta.
Podesta. That's it. God, thank you very much. So, I mean, he's not that horrible at that level. He is quite hardcore. I mean, in that particular sense, I just wouldn't have him as my chief of staff. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind people that he was the 23rd White House chief of staff who served Barack Obama in his first 2 years. And I think he set him up very nicely for a catastrophic loss in the midterm elections.
Indeed.
And I do believe he said the left should go fuck itself.
Yes, indeed. He said that too.
And Obama didn't challenge that. Yeah, he's a pretty solid corporate Democrat. If you think that the Democratic Party needs to cater more to corporations and the wealthy, he's probably a good guy.
Yeah, I don't understand why he's the ambassador to Japan. It's just there's a whole bunch of other issues about Democrats that always are annoying. And in fact, the Democratic National Committee has a lot of splaining to do. And these are times that require a little bit more radical approach to the party. Particularly since they lost everything. That is the Congress, whatever. It's just, I mean, there were bright spots this year. Tammy Baldwin reelected, Gallego elected in Arizona. I mean, some things were okay. So, but not everything was okay. And there were some real bad things that happened. And this stuff needs to be turned around rather than the clown show that we're going to get for about 4 years. It's just like horrible, horrible, horrible. Well, on that bright note, we're going to try and do better next week. We really will.
Now, just one more thing about Rahm Emanuel. Am I mistaken? Didn't he serve in the IDF as well?
Yes, for a brief moment. It wasn't a full scale shooting stuff and whatever. It was sort of a background thing that he did. He did it during a summer, I think, that it was in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's not like that other nut who's in the Congress who ran around with his IDF uniform on. So, I mean,
but I'm sure he'll be equally as unbiased.
Well, I mean, he's gotten $55,000 in donations from Elon Musk, so he does have a position somehow. I've
heard some talk that the head of the Wisconsin Democratic Committee will become the national head.
Yeah, I just sent him a note suggesting that that's what should happen to Ben
Wickler. Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a thing in Daily Kos, and I decided to chime in and say, you should be the DNC chair. He's very good. He's good at, I think it's probably one of the toughest jobs in the world is trying to be head of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin. But I think they were well resourced and they did what they needed to do. It's just, this is just a bad time in history. I agree with Lynn, down with centrists. Sometimes having a centrist in place is a good thing, depending on what they do, but it does still depend on what they do. I mean, I like Rahm Emanuel sending people dead fish. I just like that idea that there should be more of that. But on the other hand, he didn't do what he needed to do for other things in the Obama administration. And I'm not sure he did the best thing for being mayor of Chicago either. Since he
No,
had,
he's been awful in everything he's done. I just, he's
You know.
just, he's not, oh, I'm
Anyway,
speechless.
time to go. We'll do better next week. Bye.